Welcome to the Tomorrow Today Podcast. My name is Buhle Dlamini, and as always, I am joined by my colleague Graeme Codrington as we'll help you map the future of business.
We've had a really great time over the last few episodes of this podcast, learning about the most significant things that future-focused organizations are focusing on. And what we want to do in this episode is give you a highlights package with additional insights that we've gained from your feedback.
We want to thank all those who have joined us over the past 3 months and since we launched this podcast. And we also thank you for liking and subscribing.
If you haven't done that yet, please take a moment to do it and even write a review on your chosen podcast platform. It really does help us to get noticed.
Thank you also for the feedback that we've received. Please keep sending us your thoughts and your requests as we plan for season 2. We're really looking forward to be delving into something, again, even more exciting than season 1 has been. I mean, it's been really a great engagement as we looked at some of the keys for building a future-focused organization. So the plans for the future, we are going to be sharing those at the end of this episode. So please stay tuned so that you know what's coming up next.
But now, let's get on with looking at that summary of future-focused organizations and what they focus on.
Well, what this podcast is about is how to build an organization, whether it's a business, a team, a charity, or government, or whatever level that you're looking at, and that is set up and ready for the 2030s. Now, that might seem like something that's far away or maybe something that's tomorrow, depending on your perspective and how you think about these things. But the truth of the matter is we'll be in the 2030s in your next strategic cycle. So we really do need to be thinking about it now more than ever.
And Buhle, what we've found is that the organizations that look as if they are ready for the 2030s already, they are ready, in other words, for whatever might come our way with all of the disruptive potential and everything that's likely to happen over the next 5 to 10 years. We've uncovered 5 characteristics that we believe are essential to ensuring that an organization is ready for whatever and ready for the 2030s, not just to survive and limp into the next decade, but rather to have a competitive advantage in their industries.
Yeah, we do use labels for each of these 5 characteristics, and hopefully to get you to rethink and unlearn your current approach. Now, if you've been listening to this podcast, those are some of the words that we use quite a lot in our way of speaking. We talk about unlearning, we talk about rethinking. And that's what really being future focused is all about. So we're not just trying to be smart or cute with these labels, but rather to be memorable and thought-provoking so that this is something that sticks to your mind and sticks to the way that you think about the future and how to be future-proofing your organization. So the 5 characteristics of organizations that will be future-proof and ready for the 2030s are Bionic, opportunity-focused, anti-fragile, inclusive, and a force for good.
The previous 6 episodes go into details about these, so if you haven't listened to those, it might be a good time to go back and listen in more detail. But Buhle, what we decided to do with this episode was to just have a conversation, summarize these 5 characteristics, and then share what we have learned ourselves through the interviews and the discussions and the insights and the research that we put into those episodes. So, Buhle, why don't you go ahead and kick us off with that first one, Bionic. What does it mean? And what was your big aha or takeaway from the work that we did on Bionic?
Yeah, so even before I start speaking about Bionic, I think it's important for our listeners to just remember how we got through this process. I mean, we've had some of our colleagues help us through this journey. And I think it was on our second episode where we had Dean take us through understanding how organizational design is going to need to be different as we go forward. And as part of that, we delved into this concept of bionic and the importance of organizations of the future becoming bionic. And we spoke extensively about the future of business being bionic. And that means that successful organizations are going to be the ones that harness the power of human capital and technology at the same time. And the description that I really love, and that's become a real aha moment, even as we have been delving into this topic even more, is that the way that you need to think about building bionic business is that it means using the technology of the day to create superhuman performance that is good for business, good for people, and good for the planet. I mean, this is really, really powerful. And so as leaders, really we need to be shifting our mindset in the way that we think about technological advances for our organizations to change the way that we are structured, the way that we do things, the way that we manage people and technology in order to bring those things together to create a bionic organization. And a big part of this, and I know that I'm getting excited here, maybe I'm staying a little bit too long here, but we believe that there are 3 dimensions to consider for bionic business. Number 1 is that bionic business is about smart tech that helps to supercharge our human capacity. And number 2, the second dimension is that this smart tech has to be good for business, that it actually delivers on business efficiency and allows our business to be successful. And then the third dimension is that it also leads us to having business for good, business that is good for the planet, business that is good for the people, and business that's good for the bottom line. I mean, what else can you ask for? So bionic business and bionic future is the way to go.
And for me, a big aha was this issue of what it means to be good for business and business for good, and mixing those two things. I think that you mentioned Dean earlier, and I think Dean invited us all to imagine that we could dream bigger dreams. If all we're doing with technology and AI and digitization is to improve our existing businesses, and we're not imagining that we could solve some of the big problems in the world, that we could deliver a better life for everybody in the world, that we could make this world a better place to live in. I mean, it almost sounds like you have to burst into poetry and song when you start to listen to some of how Dean talks about this. But I think he's right. And I think that we're not just supercharging efficiency. We are needing to supercharge our dreams and the potential to do amazing things that haven't been done before. So for me, stretching ourselves like that was definitely one of the big themes that came out of the podcast episodes we've done so far.
Absolutely, Graeme. And it's also just to remember that when we're talking bionic, we are talking not only just about advances in technology, but also advances in how we work better with each other. And so that was another big part of being bionic. And so sort of like leveraging that diversity of humans as well as the diversity of technology as we come together.
Absolutely.
What is the second one, Graeme, in terms of the characteristics that we're looking at in terms of the future focus organization of the 2030s?
So bionic, number 1. Number 2 was what we called opportunity focused. And what this really was is that we mustn't be scared to look at the future, to try and identify where disruption will come from. We can't predict what's going to happen, but we can see some of the forces and trends that are likely to change how the world will work. And then instead of putting on a threat mindset where we look at disruption and we think, oh no, everything I've worked for is going to change, we need to shift to a more opportunity mindset to say, where are the opportunities that exist in that disruption? And so for me, the aha that emerged out of our conversations was that we need this idea of strategic imagination. We need to have some kind of framework to know where we should look. And we actually mentioned two frameworks, the TIDES model. We need to look at technology, institutional change, demographics, the environment, and social values. And then also look at some of the more immediate, we call them elephants in the room, things that are going to shift the way that the world works in the next few years in a way that will be disruptive if you don't have this opportunity mindset on you. So we need to see where to look with a framework, but then also we need skills in how to look. And probably my favorite thing, so I'm cheating a bit, this is not really an aha. It's just the aha is that so many people have commented on it and really love it, is the concept of 5 minutes from the future. And what we meant by that is you need to get everybody in your team involved in thinking about the future, and you need to do it regularly. And we suggested that you take the first 5 minutes of the first team meeting of every week and do a little scenario. What might change in the future, 5 years, 10 years from now? Just get your team thinking a little bit more vibrantly about the future on a regular basis. And people seem to love that as an idea.
Yes, and for me, it was also about thinking about future readiness when it comes to this second characteristic of being opportunity focused. So we have to ask ourselves just some specific questions. And so the questions that we took away from that episode really looked at things like, what frameworks are we currently using to think about disruption? And do we actually think about the frameworks, or do we take the time to employ certain frameworks that will help us to think about disruption? And secondly, do you have a radar system in place for detecting disruption? Do you have things that help you to recognize, okay, there's a disruption taking place. What are we going to do as a business? What are we going to do as a team or as an organization in order to deal with it? And then it was, are you updating your view of the future regularly? So that 5 minutes from the future could be definitely one of the ways that we do that. And then a big part of all of this is, do we get the whole team involved? That it's not just a function of the leaders or a function of leadership, but it's the function of an organization that is future focused, that everybody plays an active role in being opportunity focused, thinking about future trends and innovation.
And Buhle, just those questions that you've asked, there were a number of clients that were taken by surprise when, and this is a political example, so a little bit of a trigger warning for those of you who don't like politics or American politics. But during the course of our recording of the first season, the American elections were thrown into a little bit of chaos when Joe Biden unexpectedly stepped down and made space for Kamala Harris to step up. And in the framework of American elections, this is something that's never happened before. And it was fascinating to watch some people just completely freaked out about that. I'm not talking about the political choices, whether they're Republican or Democrat or otherwise, but literally some people just saying, this is not possible. This can't happen. Is this in the rules? Is it allowed? And then other people who I think are a little bit more switched on to adaptability and responsiveness to change and scenario thinking, saying, oh, well, here's our new reality. Now we have to shift focus and move on. And it was fascinating to notice that Kamala Harris herself seemed to be able to shift very quickly with her campaign to be able to respond to the fact that she was now moving at a speed she didn't expect to, doing things she wasn't expecting to do just a few weeks earlier. So there's an example, a big world stage example of somebody who had to have that adaptability quite quickly. That Absolutely. Actually leads us to the third piece. Sorry, Buhle, you wanted to say?
That's exactly what I was going to say, Graeme, that does lead us to the third example, which looks at, or third characteristic, which looks at antifragile and adaptive. Tell us a little bit more about that and your aha moment, Graeme.
Well, so adaptability we understand, right? But anti-fragility takes a step further than that. And it says we're not just able to respond when things are chaotic and turbulent and changing, but we actually get stronger when times are tough. We get better during times of uncertainty and chaos. And we come out the other end of tough times, not just resilient. We haven't just been knocked down and get back up again, but we're actually in a better position than we were where we started. And for me, the aha moment in all of that was my interview with Tamron Batchelor-Adams, the psychologist who works with us. And she was talking about her book, Mavericks. And in reading through the book again to prepare for the interview, they had interviewed leaders from a variety of different fields. Business leaders, yes, but also government people, yes, people in charities and nonprofit organizations, people working on farms and in schools. And I just realized again that the work that we do applies to everybody, everywhere, and every area of our lives. We need to be anti-fragile parents. We need to be anti-fragile students. We need anti-fragile teachers. Anti-fragility is something that is important in every part of our lives. And often I tend to just think of the work that I do with businesses, but I can apply anti-fragility everywhere.
Well, as a matter of fact, we used your example, Graeme, as you preparing for this crazy order challenge that you are about to do in a few weeks, or is it a few months?
Don't remind me. When we discussed it in the Antifragile episode, it was a few months away. Now it's like a few days away, and I'm getting very nervous. I hope I am anti-fragile.
And what it really highlighted was basically the whole concept of anti-fragility, that it is about gaining from disorder. It is about growing stronger during tough times. And it is about thriving in chaos and uncertainty. And so if you're going to be successful in this fast-changing world, and as we go into the 2030s, anti-fragility is really one of those key characteristics that you need to develop first as a leader, but also that you need to make it a part of your organization. And if you go back to that episode, you will see how we contrasted fragile systems with anti-fragile systems. And you can actually then see where your organization falls or where your leadership style falls, and maybe make some adjustments and adaptations in order for you to become more anti-fragile. But it's really, really an exciting future if you start thinking of the future that way. And the next one, of course, the next characteristic is that of the organizations or that are future-proof or that future-proof leaders need to be inclusive. And so this is my area of expertise. This is where my light gets switched on and I get excited. And so throughout the different episodes, we have actually delved into this in one way or another. So when it comes to organizations of the future, being inclusive, not just being diverse, is going to be quite important. And the reason we are focusing on inclusive is that for a long time, organizations have been focusing on diversity. And organizations that are going to succeed in the future will need to continue to focus on diversity. But the point is, diversity is here. Diversity is a given. It's not enough for organizations just to be diverse, but to actually leverage that diversity and the benefits that come from diversity, we need to become more inclusive. And the quote that I've used extensively in this podcast over the last few episodes is by Vene Myers, where she talks about the fact that diversity is being invited to the party, whereas inclusion is being asked to dance. That really talks about a shift in mindset in the way that we engage with our teams, creating a truly inclusive space that allows people to bring their unique differences in order to make our organizations great. And this is moving away from just tolerating difference to actually embracing it and leveraging it for our growth and our success. But our world is changing as well. And so if we're thinking bionic, what does inclusion mean in a more bionic future as well is another one that we need to be thinking about.
I'd always love that quote, Buhle, from Werner Myers, and I don't want to stretch her analogy beyond its breaking point, but I picture a party where there's a whole lot of people who've arrived, and you say it's not just being invited to the party, it's being asked to dance. And then I wonder, is there a word that goes even further than inclusion? Because it's not just being asked to dance, it's being allowed to play your own music. And then maybe it goes even further and saying, and then teaching other people how to dance to the music that you have brought. And then for me personally, I think of myself as not only sort of learning how to dance with somebody else's music, but I don't really like the music. It's actually learning to fall in love with the music as I learn how to dance to it. So, yeah, we can maybe stretch her picture too far, but I think there's a lot more work to be done than just ticking the box of diversity. And maybe inclusion even needs a bigger and a further word beyond that. But that's the word we're using at the moment. And for me, the aha that then came out of that was exactly what you were saying around bringing the concept of bionic into this conversation, that we almost need to think of the applications, the technologies, the digitization as being now another person in the team. And as we have to have inclusion towards people who may be of different cultures or different sexualities or different religions or different personalities, maybe we need to treat the technology that we use as just another team member and then apply the same cultural intelligence approach to connecting and engaging with different types of technology. So there's a lot for me to think around techno-diversity in the inclusion space, maybe techno-inclusion. I'm not sure exactly what words we should use, but a big aha for me as we looked at that in detail.
Absolutely. And it really does go back to saying it's just not enough for us to think about diversity and to think about inclusion, but we also need to be equipping ourselves with the necessary skills that make that happen. And so as you were talking about the different styles of dancing, learning to dance to a different beat, and also learning to teach others how to dance to your beat. So this is really a lot about a give and take way of leading, a give and take way of engaging with team members, a give and take way of engaging around this. And so one of the concepts that we've already introduced, maybe just slightly in this first season, was the concept of cultural intelligence and how that helps us then have the skills and the capabilities that help us to do that even more. But as you just highlighted, Graeme, the techno-diversity or techno-inclusion, and not to be confused with techno music here, because we're talking about dancing, but actually talking about the technology aspect of inclusion and how that also needs to be a big focus, especially when we're starting to think a lot about the technologies that are being integrated into the way that we work and the way that we engage. So that takes us to the last characteristic, Graeme, that talks about a force for good. And so when we talk about organizations of the future, we need to be thinking that these organizations will need to be a force for good. And Mark Bainoff, CEO of Salesforce, said that the first 4 industrial revolutions have been hard on humanity and the planet, and that we need to use these technologies for the good of the world with the trust of employees, customers, and partners. And so, end quote. And when you think about this quote, it really is touching on the fact that as we go into the future, it's no longer just going to be enough for us to think about how can we get the best, or how can we get the most out of people? But that we need to shift our mindset to say, how do we get the best out of people? Those two things are not the same. In the old way of thinking, business was about extracting value from people, from the planet, from everything. And it wasn't so much about giving value. And so the challenge for the future of organizations is not only just to extract value, but it's about how do we create value and give value that actually shapes our future and shapes our businesses. And it is quite important because if we don't think about this in the 2030s, the effects of climate change, the effect of angry people, and all of these other elements that we brought when we spoke about the seven elephants, seven gray elephants, are going to start show up in big ways that will affect the way that we do business. If we don't adjust now, and if we don't change now to becoming business for good in the way that we lead and in the way that we do business, we're going to find that actually business is going to become even more difficult for people who are not this way or who are not this minded when it comes to thinking about business.
Yeah, and Buhle, that was one of my ahas as well. And maybe let me be even more specific with what I took away from it, is that today's younger generations, they're going to want this. This is what they're going to look for, not only when they buy your products and services, but also when they decide to give you their labor and expertise in exchange for a salary and a career. They want to do it with a company that aligns with their values, with a company that's actually contributing to the world. But as I say that now, I actually think that that's probably true of all five of these things. Being Bionic, today's young people want to work in an organization that doesn't feel it comes from an older era. They want to feel that they're on the edge of what's really happening with technology. They want to be opportunity and future focused. They want to be anti-fragile. They don't want to feel that their job's always in jeopardy or things could go wrong in the blink of an eye. And they definitely want to work in a diverse and inclusive environment where they know that people are have the psychological safety to be who they really are. And to come into a workplace that makes a difference in the world. So, yeah, these are things that will help your organization to be ready for whatever comes your way. They'll be setting you up for success and competitive advantage in the 2030s, and they will guarantee that you gain the attention of today's and tomorrow's young people, and in fact, everybody who is thinking about the future. So there's our summary of season 1 and what we've done so far on this podcast. We hope that what we've done in this episode is just give you a sense of what we were trying to do in putting a picture together of a future-focused organization. And if you haven't listened to the previous episodes, please go back and do that. There's a lot more insights and some great interviews that will help you as well. But that, from my side, is the end of season 1.
Thank you so much for, going on the journey with us as we have looked at mapping the future of business. So the question is, what comes next for the next season? Season 1 has really been about setting the foundation for us to think about the future of business and to think about what it is that we need to do differently in order for us to succeed as we go forward. Season 2 will start after a short break, and in a few weeks' time, we'll be looking at another sort of like wave as we go into mapping the future of business. And what's going to happen in season 2 is that we're going to have more focused episodes with interviews of CEOs and leaders who are applying these 5 characteristics. So it's going to be really, really exciting. If you noticed that in the first season, we focused on utilizing and having interviews with our team members from the Tomorrow Today business and Tomorrow Today organization. But what we're going to be doing more in the second season is interviews with CEOs and titans of industry in different platforms and different backgrounds. And so we're going to be looking at what are they doing, what they are learning, and what we can learn from them and with them. So I hope that you are going to be ready to tune in for the second season of the Tomorrow Today podcast. We're looking forward to it, and we're looking forward to the exciting future that it's going to bring. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Tomorrow Today podcast. And we do hope that you found it insightful and helpful for your business journey. And please go ahead and check the show notes to recap on what we have covered. Follow us on social media with the links provided. And remember to subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening to us right now. And we are looking forward to seeing you in the next season of the Tomorrow Today podcast, mapping the future of business.